You are listening to the Keep the Weight Off podcast with Dr. Angela, episode number 113.
Welcome to the Keep the Weight Off podcast, where we bust all the dieting myths and discover not just how to lose weight, but more importantly, how to keep it off. We go way beyond the food, and we use science and psychology to give you strategies that work. And now your host, Dr. Angela Zechmann.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to this week's podcast. We are recording this on a Monday morning. How was your weekend, Marshall? This is always kind of fun because we don't see each other too much on the weekends.
Yeah.
So he's like,
Hi, everybody. It was great. It was great.
Yeah. You had a good weekend?
Yeah. Relaxing.
Yeah, mine was too. Super relaxing. So got a lot of stuff done too. That was good. So I wanted to talk this week about the types of things that our primitive brains will say to us in order to get us to indulge. So this week's podcast was inspired by a conversation that I had with one of our patients in the clinic last week. And this often happens that I get inspired to talk about something based on the struggles that people talk about with me. Sometimes in the clinic, sometimes it's in our online program, which is called Empowered Weight Loss. If you're new and you don't know about that program, it's an awesome program. But this particular conversation was particularly poignant because it really pointed out to me the tricks that our brains will play on us, even when we're years into our weight loss journey. So I want to just give you some backstory on what was going on. So this woman has done incredible work, and she'd lost 30 or 40 pounds many, many years ago, and she's kept it off. And she's in maintenance. She sees me every 3 months or so for a maintenance check. And she really understands that she's got a chronic disease and she needs ongoing treatment. And she's got this disease well under control and she's doing great. Well, about 3 weeks ago, I got this panicked call from her. She's like, Doc, I'm putting on weight. I can feel it. I can feel that my clothes are getting tighter. I haven't changed anything about my eating habits. What's going on? I think maybe I need a medication change. I think something might be happening. So we talked on the phone, and she had an appointment coming up in a couple of weeks. And so I told her to spend the next 2 weeks writing down everything that she had to eat and drink and measuring the food as much as possible. And we'd get a body composition done when she came into the office, and we would find out what was actually really going on. Okay. So when she came into the office, the body composition testing confirmed that her fears were correct. She actually had been gaining some body fat. Now, it wasn't a lot, but it was enough that we could tell that something was a little bit off. So the next thing to do was to review her food journal. And luckily, she'd done a really good job of it. And this is one thing that I want all of our listeners to know, just how helpful it is if you're writing down everything that you're eating and doing your best to actually weigh and measure it so that we can get a really good sense of what's actually happening. So we had some excellent data to work with, which brilliant job on her part. So I went through the food journal with her, step by step, piece by piece. And I'm looking for occasions where she might have been having little slips that would cause weight gain that she might not have been recognizing. And what I noticed is that on some days for breakfast, she was having cinnamon toast instead of a good protein meal. And she said, oh, that's only on the weekends. Usually I eat a really good breakfast. And then there were several times where she'd eaten some fish crackers. And she'd measured it out. And I can't remember, I think it was about a cup, maybe half a cup or a cup. And she said, yeah, I have those in the house because I babysit my 2-year-old grandson. He absolutely loves them. And when they're around, I tend to eat them. And then she also told me that she socializes a lot on the weekends and her friends drink a glass or two of wine every night. Well, she only drinks wine on the weekends when she's with them. She doesn't really even like wine. So she figures that during the weekdays, if she's not drinking wine like her friends, that means she can have a food treat, whatever it may be. And it was so interesting because I could tell that I wasn't hearing her. I was hearing her primitive brain finding any and all excuses it could find to get its dopamine hit. It was trying to work around her cognitive knowing, meaning the thoughts that are in her prefrontal cortex, her knowing brain. It was trying to work around that, knowing that these types of foods were not good for her and were going to cause her to struggle with obesity and all of its complications. And it was just making up excuses. So I explained to her that this is what was going on. So her primitive brain was telling her that somehow weekend splurges were okay. And her primitive brain was telling her that, well, if you don't drink wine, you can have some extra calories for food treats. And her primitive brain was telling her that it's okay to give a 2-year-old a highly addictive drug like fish crackers, which are flour, for a treat. Now, remember what we talked about last week and how sugar and flour have just as much addictive potential as nicotine does. And in animal studies, they're 8 times more addictive than cocaine. So her primitive brain is like, yeah, it's fine to have fishy crackers for the 2-year-old for a treat. And, if they're around, it's okay to have some yourself too. And her primitive brain was telling her that all of these things were okay. They're just little things. They don't matter. A little bit's fine. Okay? So when I explained to her that this is what was happening, that her primitive brain was just sort of feeding her excuses to get its dopamine hit, and that's why she was gaining weight. She was actually pretty shocked that she'd been duped like that. We both had a pretty good laugh about it. I just remember her eyes were so big. Have you ever felt like that, Marshall?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, especially after you and I have talked about some things that have happened to me in the past.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just want all of you, our beloved listeners, to just ask yourself, what kinds of excuses does your primitive brain make up so that it can get its dopamine hit? I'll tell you some of mine. I've just experienced these excuses recently. So I haven't really mentioned it too much, but I'm training for a 5-mile race. It's in May. It's in mid-May. And so I've been out running more than I usually do. And it's fun, but it's challenging. And so my primitive brain is saying, oh, you know what? You worked so hard. You just had a great run. You can have some extra food. You probably need the extra calories. Have some more nuts, even though I'm not necessarily physically hungry for it, right? My primitive brain told me that when I was with my siblings in Wichita, that it was so stressful, I need and I deserve a glass of wine. My primitive brain always is saying things to me like, one more won't hurt. It could be one more glass of wine. It could be one more protein bar. It could be one more French fry that I'm stealing off of my boyfriend's plate. Lots of little things like that. So do you have primitive brain messages, Marshall?
Yeah. So I was just thinking one thing for me is fruit. Fruit's a really slippery slope for me yeah, when I trying to make excuses or something, fruit is usually what sneaks in for me.
But fruit's good for you. So
it is, yeah, fruit is good for you. That's why it's so easy for me to justify it.
So what
and
does your brain
it? My brain will say oh, you can have, because first it'll be berries and they're good for you, right? And it's okay to eat them. And then it's pineapple and then pineapple with whipped cream on it. And so, so it always leads to sugar. Because I get the taste for it. And then, so fruit always has been a slippery slope for me because it always leads to other things.
Yeah. Dried fruit can really...
Yeah, dried fruit as well. Yeah.
Dried fruit can be a big issue for a lot of people because the sugar is so concentrated in that, that will give you a huge dopamine hit. But I love pineapple. I love mangoes. Those are super easy to overindulge in too. Yeah.
Yeah, I always overeat. I always overeat it because it's so good.
Dark chocolate is another one that will get me. Just because it's
I didn't think about
dark
that. Yep,
chocolate.
For sure.
Yeah. It's dark, and so that means there's not a lot of sugar in it. So that means it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
It's not a problem to have some dark chocolate. Yeah, it's just, there are all of these little slippery slopes. And so, our primitive brain will also say things like, this happens to almost everybody. Look at what everyone else is eating. I don't eat half that much crap as they do. So I won't gain weight if I have just a little bit of it. Does your primitive brain ever say that?
Oh, yeah, a lot. Yeah, definitely. I do that a lot.
Like, everybody else is eating so much more than me. Like, I can have a little bit extra. It'll be fine, And then something that I call the exercise halo effect, which happens to me all the time. I just worked really, really hard in the gym. So this treat is just fine. Like this morning, I just went and I did a pretty heavy leg workout. And so I do notice that on leg days, I do get a little bit more physically hungry, but I also have to really monitor my primitive brain, because my primitive brain will have me thinking, yeah, it's okay. Even if, I have to really pay attention to when I'm actually physically hungry on these leg days, because so much of the time my primitive brain's like, oh, you know what? That's hard work. Those leg workouts are really hard on you. And so your body's just going to need more food. So you can have more,
Yeah,
so.
I've done that too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've talked a lot on the podcast about holidays and vacations and how our primitive brains love to use those occasions as excuses to get their dopamine hits. And it's so interesting because it's actually totally possible to have a great vacation with all the food and alcohol splurges. One of our patients came in just this last week, and she was actually in absolute tears of joy and pride. You remember that?
Oh, yeah, I do remember this. It was awesome.
Yeah. She'd just gotten back from an all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and she didn't drink at all, and she ate really well. And she said, this was the best vacation ever. I felt great. I had tons of energy, and I remember every single detail about all the fun things we did. She was with her kids, and they had gone and swum in cenotes and had all kinds of beach experiences and stuff. She said, I never had such a great time on vacation before. And it was a really amazing experience for her not to use vacations as an excuse to indulge in the demands of the primitive brains for dopamine. She said, usually there's a lot of her vacation that she doesn't remember because she was a drinker. And so she'd be like coming home from vacation going, I think I had fun.
Yeah, I've been there. Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you do that because, typically vacations are to tap out and to party and all those, the all-inclusive. It's like eat whatever and drink whatever as much as you can. And so, it's very tempting to do those things.
It's very much so. So yeah, it is entirely possible to have a great vacation without splurging on food and alcohol. As a matter of fact, it's likely you'll have an even better vacation if you don't. But our primitive brains do not like that idea. So
what was so great about it is, honestly, she's probably the first person that I have seen that came back from a vacation like that, just like beaming with joy and energy. And she was, typically when people get back from vacations like that, they need a vacation from their vacation. Right. They are burned out. They're exhausted. They're probably a little bit hungover. And she was just radiating. She felt so good. She was so happy, so clear-minded. It was just really refreshing to see that. So, just like I wanted that, it's like it made you feel like you wanted that to be part of that. And so it was wonderful. It was so neat to witness that. So.
How many times do people come back from a vacation and they're like, oh yeah, I was just down at this all-inclusive resort and I probably gained 5 pounds and I just feel like crap. And
you hear it all the time. I know.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. It was super refreshing to hear this woman.
Yeah, it was great.
And she was just ecstatically happy because that was the first time she'd ever done that. And she's like, I really know how to do vacations now. Like I can actually go on a vacation and have a great time. And she's looking forward to her next one, and I think she's going to England next or Scotland or something. And she's just super excited.
It was super inspiring.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So that's our podcast for this week. Remember to just start to notice all of these excuses that your primitive brain is making. Depending on where you are on the journey, You may not have enough practice yet not to succumb to the urges, and that's just fine. I don't want you to think anything's going wrong if you do end up following your primitive brain. I just want you to be thinking about this and developing some awareness around it. The primitive brain is really, really tricky for all of us, and learning how to manage it is the key to lasting weight loss and lasting health. As always, remember that if you'd like help, I've got an amazing online program called Empowered Weight Loss that will give you all the tools you need to really learn how to manage your brain, all the primitive urges, all the thoughts that get in your way of lasting success at weight loss. It's a comprehensive and a deep program offered as a membership that you can stay in for as long as you want and need to. Just go to journeybeyondweightloss.com/yes to sign up. So thanks for listening, everyone, and have a great week. Take care.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Hey, if you really want to lose weight and keep it off for good, your next step is to sign up for Dr. Angela's free weight loss course, where you're going to learn everything you need to get started on your weight loss journey the right way. Just head over to journeybeyondweightloss.com/free course to sign up. Also, it would be awesome if you could take a few moments and write a review on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you in Journey Beyond Weight Loss.